Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great, thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, back for another patrons only video. This is gonna be a very highly requested topic. I think people have seen my tweets on this and I have very, very strong feelings on it. So I'm finally getting to it. If you DM'd me about it or if you sent me an email, I'm getting to it. Today we're gonna talk about the whole acting white stuff and basically people who felt alienation from Black communities as a child. So a couple of days ago, I did a video on my chosen family and why they're so important to me and how critical finding that group of Black folks was to me becoming a hardcore Black feminist and loving Black people the way that I do, and how I definitely could have ended up somewhere else. Easily, girl, easily. Okay. So I feel very strongly about this because it seems that when Black people on the internet talk about the ways that they felt isolated from the other Black kids that they grew up around, or maybe not completely embraced, people are very quick to gaslight them and tell them it's all in your mind, you made it up, or it's your fault. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And I know it's not true because I have encountered enough Black people to know it's not just me and it's not just them. You know, so anyways, and I get really bothered by it. So let's talk about it. So I grew up with Black parents who really loved Black people. My father, despite being a Republican, had a really strong racial consciousness. He went to Tuskegee, and he was really like a Booker T. Washington, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, Black folks Republican. Now it gets a little dicey, and even when I was a kid, I was like, because I've been this liberal since I was a kid, I'd be like, it's not right. What you're saying, something's not right. But still liked Black people, liked to be in Black spaces. My mother also similarly liked Black people, liked to be in Black spaces, made sure that my sister and I went to Black stuff, and my mom is an engineer. I say this all the time. It's a big part of her, that is a big part of her identity. She's one of those people. So we would go to the NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers conferences, and, you know, go to the church stuff and go to the NAACP stuff. And, you know, she wanted us to know that we were Black. And we watched Black movies, and we go to Tyler Perry. I mean, we did Black stuff, right? And so, but I mean, you know, I also spent a good deal of time in white spaces. So the way that residential segregation works is if you want to get a great education for your children, you know where you gotta move? The suburbs. Where I live, that's what you gotta do. Or you gotta send your kid to a charter school, which is, okay. I've charter thoughts, but we can't get into that. But that's how it works. So I went to wonderful schools in the suburbs. Outside of Dallas. I lived in North Dallas for a part of my life, and I've lived in a suburb of Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma for another part of my life. And the thing about that is you are juggling two worlds. So in my daytime life, you're in the white world and you're absorbing the mainstream culture, and you know, that's, you know, I speak like this, obviously, you know, people comment on the way that I speak quite frequently. And you know, you pick up the mannerisms, you pick up the vocal inflections. I actually love that I know a lot about mainstream pop culture. But also, I know a lot about Black culture, okay? Like, and I can do all the dances, and I know the history, and I know what you are supposed to wear when you go to Black church, and what the traditions are, and when you're supposed to stand. I feel very fortunate to have had two distinct kinds of socialization, but it's hard to balance. It is. And my mother, who raised her children. And also I have to say that I have an older sister, but me and my older sister didn't quite grow up the same way either, because she's 8 years older, and frankly, I just lived a much more privileged life than she did. Okay? There is a big difference between having a child when you're 22 and having a child when you're 30. And so my life was a lot different than my sister's. So anyways, so my sister is blacker. I'll say, you know, like she went to schools that were a little bit blacker, and yeah, and went to and had friends that were just, you know, more black, and we grew up in different places, right? So the way that I was socialized and the way that she was socialized was different. So my sister couldn't tell me how to navigate it. My mom sure as hell couldn't tell me how to navigate it. First of all, because she was working all the time. My dad didn't, I mean, you know. So it was up to me as a kid to try to figure out, how do I balance these two very different cultures? It ain't easy, okay? And so we went to church a lot, okay? My mom is very religious. I still have great reverence and respect for black churches, but I had lots of encounters with black kids, primarily at church and occasionally at other, you know, black social spaces. And I figured out early that we weren't doing the same thing, you know? Like, the way that I spoke was different, the way that I dressed was different. And in every black space that I've ever been in, I was able to find like one other black person, you know, but generally we weren't meshing, you know. I wasn't cool. I didn't dress cool. I didn't talk cool. I was just different, you know. And also, I will also say another thing was, I was a super high achiever. I always say this. I'm not joking. It's not a brag. That's just who I was. That was my identity. I was best grades, top of the class, winning all the awards. That was me. Now, I did that stuff in part because I got so much praise from everybody, black adults. You know, I know that people have a problem with being called articulate or whatever. I don't. I have no problem with people calling me well-spoken. I have no problem with people calling me articulate, because throughout my life, the main people who called me well-spoken and articulate were black adults. And I don't find that to be racial or racialized in any way, because most people are not articulate. You know, like, most people are not well-spoken. And because that positive reinforcement came from other black people who look like me, I don't have any problem with that. You know, look, I'm not really arrogant about my gifts at all. I know that I could get in a car crash tomorrow and not be able to talk. But since I was a little kid, I've been a good talker. And so black adults loved me, you know, and, you know, as I said in the Harvard video, like, in black spaces, and maybe we should not do this to kids. If you're an adult, don't do this. But in black spaces, even when I was around other black children, the black adults would be like, everybody look at Kim, be like Kim, do what Kim does. So that made me feel really good, because, you know, I was searching for validation, but that also creates a wedge. So now I talk like this, I dress like this, I listen to weird music, my cultural references aren't the same, but also all the black adults are seeing me and saying, y'all aren't doing, you know, saying to the other kids my age, y'all aren't doing life right. You need to be like her, and she's so great, and, you know, lifting me up. And, like, as much as I loved it, oh girl, I loved it, that increased the kinds of separation that was between me and the other black kids. And that is a real thing. It really bothers me when people say, black kids didn't like you because you were stuck up. And, like, I don't think that's true, right? Like, I certainly had a kind of social anxiety that people can mistake for arrogance or mistake for thinking you're too good or whatever. But what I now understand is that when I was being excluded or not invited to the parties or, you know, whatever, they were just telling me that we're different. And we were different. And that is painful, particularly because I grew up with Black people who love Black people and who tried to inculcate the idea in me so firmly, like, Black people are your community. This is where you need to go. These are the people you need to trust. But I had such a difficult time meshing. It was so hard. And that's a real thing. And it really bothers me that people who didn't live that experience, don't even have any real firsthand knowledge of that experience, are really only relaying what they've been told about. I mean, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, sometimes I see people, particularly on Twitter, talking about this and so passionately saying this did not happen to you. And I'm like, how do you even know? You know, people be talking, and I'm like, how many white people went to the school that you went to? If you grew up in a predominantly Black area, then you and I didn't have the same upbringing. So how are you gonna tell me about what my adolescent experiences were? You don't know. You know? I think that we can't say that Blackness is not a monolith, that there are a million different kinds of Black stories, and then say that didn't happen to you when Black people are being honest about the kinds of traumas that they experience in Black communities. It don't make sense to me. It ain't right. And I feel like there's an overzealousness to strike down a certain narrative about Black folks that also erases the particular experience. And I'm not saying, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me. And one of the reasons why I have grown past, I mean, look, we all want to be well-liked. We all want to be cool. We all want to fit in. It was certainly harmful to want to be in and to want to be down with the people who look like you and be flat out rejected. That's harmful. I mean, it hurts. And it definitely does feel isolating and alienating when you're like, I know I don't fit in with the white people, you know, and I know I don't, you know, it's some weird shit to have to try to work through. It is. But I have worked through it, thankfully, and I recognize now that I don't think, when people said that I was acting white or whatever, right, it has nothing to do with being smart. You know, I think people who try to deny that this is a thing are trying to reject the idea that Black people and Black children do not respect academic achievement. You don't have to tell me that. I know that. The people who were the most enthusiastic about anything I've ever achieved in my life were Black. You don't have to tell me that. But when people were telling me, you act white, they were saying, you do not perform Blackness in the way that I perform it. They were also saying, you are separated from us in a way that I didn't choose. I didn't choose where I went to school. I didn't choose where I lived. I didn't choose the way I talked. I didn't choose the fact that your parents think that I'm the model child. But they were letting me know that I'm over here and they're over here. That's a real thing. And so now I can understand that in some form or fashion, that happens in lots of different ways. So for some people, it is about the way that you perform your racial identity. For some people, it's about the way you do gender or your religion, or do you wear glasses, or are you a comic book nerd, right? There is everybody kind of experience, well, not everybody, a lot of different people experience ostracization, alienation from a group of people that they want to belong to. But don't tell black people that it didn't happen in a racial way, because it definitely did happen. And I am very fortunate to have discovered the internet really early, and I'm also really fortunate to have chosen the college that I went to. And like another thing about it is, I know that people, you know, Issa Rae talks about this, and even Donald Glover talk about it, and I talk about it, but we're really privileged black people, okay? You know, and I think a part of the reason why this narrative is rejected is because, yeah, we're probably among the most privileged black people. You know, I grew up very stable. I'll say that. And so nobody wants to hear privileged people talking about how bad you had it. You know what I'm saying? If you are saying to me, oh, well, somebody said you talk like a white girl, but I didn't have food to eat. You know, it's like, you're right. Those struggles are not the same. You know, oh, people made fun of you for listening to Britney Spears. Well, I didn't have textbooks in my classroom. You are right. Our childhood experiences are not similarly horrible. But that don't mean that my experience didn't happen, and it don't mean that my experience wasn't hurtful. So we need to be able to hold multiple thoughts at once. Yes, one thing is bad, one thing is worse. But you still not gonna tell me that what happened to me didn't happen. It happened. And so I thankfully have the tools to work through it. I found great black friendships. I went to a wonderful university where black adults taught me about black history and black culture. And that's how I was able to work through that hurt. And also being able to go off and find other black girls in particular who said, oh yeah, because there is a particular kind of alienation that accompanies being a suburban black girl in particular, because suburban black boys get to be cool, suburban black girl, well, unless you're Donald Glover, you know. Suburban black girls just get to be alone. We just get to be by ourselves, you know, because there is a certain danger and like attraction and coolness and exoticism that comes with being a black boy that you just don't, you just a nerdy, bookish, you know, if you a black girl, you know. And that's why so many of the black, I mean, that's why we all gravitate toward each other, and we have all these sorts of experiences, and we talk about, you know, going to dances with our friends because the black boys were with the black boys in our school went to dances with the white girls, okay? Or at least the non-black girls, you know, maybe not white, maybe Asian, maybe Indian, but wasn't us, right? So we have that particular kind of thing going on. But yeah, like that's it's a real experience, and I feel a genuine empathy for anybody who has not yet been able to work through that trauma. And the other thing is, when people are like, y'all need to get over it, that was so long ago, y'all need to get over it. And I'm like, aren't we all working through childhood trauma? You talking about when your daddy yelled at you when you were 10? You talking about when your 6th grade math teacher told you weren't gonna be shit? You talking about when your best friend in 3rd grade said that your hair looked like poo? It's like, we're all working through our childhood traumas. Why is this particular childhood trauma unacceptable to explore? I don't understand. And I think, again, it is a resentment of the fact that, yeah, those of us who have this story most likely grew up to be among the most privileged kinds of black people. I'm a really privileged ass black person. My friends from college are privileged ass black people. And we get a lot of space and we get a lot of opportunity and we get to make stuff, right? And maybe there's a feeling that our voices are too loud, that we are too visible, but still. And I also think that we need to acknowledge that a lot of us who have this story, you know, we grew up before social media. I think that social media is so powerful because it can connect you to all kinds of people all over the world. So no, am I a special snowflake because I grew up going home as a black girl and watching TRL every day and listening to Blink-182? No, I'm not the only black girl in the world who did that. But I was the only black girl that I knew who did that coming up. Cause that was not what was going on in my community. Am I the only black girl in the world who went to sleep listening to show tunes? You know, no, I'm not by far. But when I did not have any models when I was a kid. I did not have any connections to other kinds of black children who did that when I was a child. I grew up in Texas, suburban Texas, North Texas, and Oklahoma. It wasn't there. We were not connected. Now, thankfully, via the internet and via social media, now I can talk about an esoteric reference, right? A niche pop culture reference from 2002, and another black person will be like, oh yeah, I remember that, right? But that's because we now are connected to millions of people across the world. We are not so atomized and isolated. I feel so great that black children growing up the way that I grew up don't ever have to experience feeling like, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm so weird and I'm so different. And it's like, girl, you're not. You just need to get out and see the world, you know, get out and connect yourself. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people like you. This is like randomly a couple of weeks ago when I talked about Grease 2. And so many black people were like, I love Grease 2. Cool writer, reproduction, score tonight. And I'm like, oh yeah. Who knew that there were so many black people who liked this? Or even, you know, I came up with the hashtag Blacks for Paramore. I'm very proud of that. I didn't know any other black kids when I was a kid who loved Paramore. When I was a teenager, did not. Wasn't there. Sorry. But there's millions of us out there. I was isolated. Girl, I grew up in Oklahoma. Okay? And so I think that we should not compare the atmosphere that we have today, where everybody can be connected, where you can find somebody who gets you on the tiniest little, the outermost margins of pop culture, to what it was like when we were children, even people who are older than me, because I grew up with the internet, you know, dial-up, but we had it. I think it's really important, and I don't know, there is a man, one particular man on Twitter who is just so, I'm like, are you threading about this again? Did a black person who grew up in the suburbs punch you in the face? Like, what? Why are you so invested in this? Every single time there's an opportunity to talk about this, he makes a thread. And I'm like, this is fucking weird. It's fucking weird to dedicate all this time to telling somebody or to telling multiple people this thing that happened to you didn't. It's fucking weird. And I'm also gonna say that that man who wants to be so invested in telling black people that this particular black experience didn't happen, just got married to a non-black person. Now look, marry whoever you want, but no black man who partnered a non-black person can tell me shit about blackness. That's how I feel. I'm not taking it back. And you know why I don't feel the same way about black women who partner non-black men? Because in every major metropolitan area, there are more black women than black men. So if you're really invested and sorry, I'm not, sorry, I'm not gonna get off on this. All I'm saying is you can't be the arbiter of no black shit if your partner ain't black. If you're a man, that's all I have to say about that. And yes, there is a gendered double standard. Do not care. I don't care. I'm sorry, my nose is stuffed up. Do I have any other thoughts about this? No, I think that's all I have to say about that. But yeah, if you are a black person who grew up having difficulty connecting to other black kids because you were weird, you weren't cool, your performance of blackness wasn't the way that they perform blackness, then I feel you and I see you and it wasn't your fault. And sometimes that's just the way that shit shakes out. And I hope you had an opportunity to work through that because there are so many black communities. There is absolutely a black community for you. You just gotta find your black community, you know? And I've said before, I'm very lucky to have been able to find my black community. We black as fuck and bougie as fuck and privileged as fuck. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. Am I bougie? Oh, maybe. I don't know. I'm sitting on the floor. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will be back at a different time. My nose is very stuffed up. My allergies are doing a whole lot right now. But thank you for watching. Bye.